Before we talk about the January delivery numbers for NIO, I've got to forewarn you. If you look at my Twixter, I've got it right there, 100 as in 100% unconventional. This is me. My view is my own. It is unique. It is not likely to be the same as anyone else's. And so now that you kind of have that disclaimer, let's get into why I think it's crazy that so many people are doing the fear mongering, the FUD spreading, all the negativity about these numbers. NIO delivered 13,863 vehicles in January. And I'm not even going to talk about the increase year over year. Here's what I want to do. We're going to come back to this in just a second. But first off, please understand that the big picture overview of this for the entire year of 2024, the BEV sales for NIO were higher than Audi, Mercedes, BMW, and Porsche combined. NIO, as a new brand, outsold all four of them in the pure BEV sales in 2024. If you want to also look at something a little shorter term, that's fair. Okay, let's do this. Let's compare NIO to Zeekr because they're not comparable to Li Auto and they're not comparable to XPeng or Xiaopeng. Those are two of the, I think, big mistakes that people make in trying to make poor comparisons that aren't really comparisons at all. Zeekr, in fact, is still not a true comparison. The reason I say that is no one else is doing the mass delivery numbers of battery swappable BEVs. It's only NIO and the NIO brands. So until their partners come out with some other battery swappable vehicles, NIO truly is in their own lane. But if we want to say, well, price wise, Zeekr is sort of, comparable. Okay, then let's look at what Zeekr did. Zeekr delivered just over 27,000 in December. And then in this month of January, they followed up with almost 12,000. Well, if we now go back and look at NIO, the 30,000 number for NIO in December is obviously a nice comparison to that 27,000 roughly number that Zeekr had, but then also following it up in January with an over 13, almost 14,000 number. Again, this is just my way of looking at things a little bit differently maybe than what some are doing. And look, full disclosure, if I wanted to get more views or clickbait the video, I would have just done some straight up fear mongering out of it because that's the way you get more views. But I'm not really here to do that. I will occasionally slip in a little clickbait, but I also try and keep it accurate and have fun with things at the same time. Now, here is what I was wondering about, and because there was a recent trend that I had kind of caught, and we talked about it here on the channel. The third full week in November and in December, there were increases on the Onvo side of things. And so what I wondered was, with Chinese New Year as a big unknown, January and February, both months sort of in my mind are, big question marks with respect to that. I was wondering what the Onvo numbers would look like in that third full week. And it looks to me, based on the 5912 number for the entire month, that they probably didn't have a big uptick as to or per what we saw in the last couple of months. And so that makes me think we might not see a big uptick in that third full week in February either. And for me, it's just as simple as acknowledging, observing, and then going, okay, well, March was really kind of the month that they wanted to come in with a 20,000 number on the delivery side anyway. So that's really going to be the more important one. Can they get there? I don't know. And if they can't or won't, I think we'll have an earnings call. So they maybe will give us a heads up on that. But now, and the reason I wanted to pull this up is this is one of NIO's partners that is coming out with a battery swappable model, and it may come out this year. Now, I'm not sure. I think I've seen a couple different representations. I'm not sure if it's the X-Seed or the Lux-Seed that is going to be coming out with a battery swappable model, but I was just curious about this. I also, kind of back to my earlier point, wanted to just make the point or remind people that, hey, this is still so early that NIO has a dominant advantage over everyone at this point for battery swappable sales in the pure BEV space. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about why I think NIO has actually focused more on the infrastructure and the power swap station build out over the last couple of years and not tried to ramp deliveries faster, or maybe been more focused on coming out with new products because of that. But also, I want to point this out. This is another partner of NIO's, and yes, they have the Zeekr brand, but I'm wondering if, because these, based on the time frames that I looked back at, these folks partnered with NIO a little earlier. And so I'm wondering if they maybe have a vehicle, a model, a brand that's going to come out with a battery swappable model. We just haven't heard about it yet. So in case that is in play and we will see it in the near future, I want to point that out also. And this is, if you haven't been over to his YouTube channel, I didn't queue up one of his videos, but he does great deep dives. He's a NIO user and owner in China, and I love his deep dives in his videos. There's always some really interesting things. I love the research side, so I appreciate it and like nerding out on that. But this is also in my mind. What happened last year in 2024? There was a change in the timing of the NT 2.0 platform and the upgrade of the models to that platform. And so I was wondering how that would take shape here in this year of 2025. This may be a bit of a teaser that was shared late in September about how that might look heading into 2025. But with the ET9 coming out in March, starting probably late March with deliveries, I think it's reasonable that NIO has tried to time things, not worrying so much about vehicle delivery ramp and the NT 3.0 update and those models coming out early in the year, because they realize with Chinese New Year and January and February, both heavy travel months, there is actually an advantage for NIO with their power swap stations and all of the additional swaps and potential revenue they could get from that during this time. That also gives them a chance to then focus on the rest of the year, which is kind of what we saw last year in 2024. It was I think a better timing on the part of NIO with how they kind of unveiled or rolled out all of their upgrades to the models. And so I think that could also be in play and part of what we'll see here, shake out over the rest of 2025. The year just started. I mean, it is really early in the year, but as I see, folks claiming to be long-term and then they're freaking out about monthly or weekly delivery numbers or insurance registration data, I just kind of laugh and I'm like, we have a very different idea of what long-term means. We're at a point where NIO is outselling all of those four conventional, luxury type brands in the pure BEV space. And there is no one competing on the mass volume delivery side of things that has a battery swappable, model that is anywhere near what NIO is doing. So I think they're way ahead. I think it's going to be hard for us to get a sense of how far ahead they are if some of their partners come out and start really doing a nice volume of sales. And, then that will make things really interesting from 2025 on. But even with that, and now back to the kind of the power swap station, how does the build out continue with that? NIO has over 3,100 power swap stations out. They want to do 5,000. They want to have 5,000 by the end of 2025. And I think they're going to need them. I also think if we go back a couple of years, and I can only speak for myself on this, but I remember when we were talking about and getting excited about all the production capacity that the factories for NIO would have in the NIO Park once it was built out, that they could be doing, like 1.3 million sales just in volume of models. But I think that NIO and maybe William Lee, maybe this is a nod to him recognizing they were so much earlier than everyone and that they could get further ahead if they further built out and established and focused on the power swap stations first, that may be why we have seen them sort of, I don't want to say pivot, but place more of an emphasis on that earlier, but then also in conjunction with the partnerships that have been announced with now what we're seeing with China doing some changes with the care of the batteries and making sure that they're safe. And then also battery swapping become more the norm. And so I just think that NIO is still the best positioned out there when you start factoring in the battery swapping and the power swap. And that's not even getting into things like the virtual power plant play, which if you haven't seen the video, I'll link it so you can check it out. And a lot of people did not watch that all the way through, which is fine. But I just think a lot of people are sleeping on a lot of stuff. And I only know this because I go so much further on the research than your average nerd. I'd like to consider myself an above average nerd, at least with respect to the research and being 100% unconventional with my views. So all said, all told, I don't know, how this shakes out in the next month or two, but the first month that I was really kind of looking ahead to, and I've said this in videos, but I'll say it again now, is March. I want to see what March looks like. But even March, they probably won't get a lot of, let's say, the ET9 deliveries out, because they typically will do those at the end of the month. And so they only get a couple of days. So really, that means January, February, March, the first quarter. And cyclically, it's usually the weak quarter anyway for sales in China, largely because of Chinese New Year. So I just think that it is way too early to get too caught up or hung up in things. But let me wrap and get this thing up and out. Have a great day. I'll see y'all again very soon.